everyone. Welcome to Datagaps webinar. I am Pooja, Growth Marketing Manager at Datagaps, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick housekeeping comments. First, we have muted all mics to avoid unintended distractions. Next, the chat room is open so that you can interact with us through the chat. And finally, at the end of the session, we'll open it up for Q&A. Today in this webinar, we will understand how you can leverage Datagaps DataOps Suite to automate your data quality monitoring, understand its AI capabilities along with data observability and profiling aspects for better enterprise decisions. On the panel today, we have David Small, VP of Sales at Datagaps, Shubhanshu Dikshit, Product Manager at Datagaps. And here is our agenda for today. First, we will be discussing how Datagaps Data Quality Monitor automates data profiling and predictive cleansing, thereby ensuring accuracy and consistency across your data pipelines. Second, we will introduce how generative AI is creating meaningful data rules to enhance the agility and responsiveness of reporting tools. Thereby, we will be dwelling into the data quality monitoring mechanism and how our suite simplifies issue detection and deployment. Thereafter, we will move on to DataOps Suite demo with a couple of real-world use cases. And this will be followed by a Q&A session. Now I hand this over to Dave. Dave, stage is all yours.
Thank you, Pooja. And welcome everybody. We're thrilled to have you on this webinar. It's, I think, sort of a fun webinar to try to put together because it's such an exciting topic today. You know, certainly AI has been around for a long time, probably over 50 years, and it takes on a lot of different meanings. But this is AI powered data quality monitoring as well. And how can AI or Gen AI help improve the data quality monitoring within your organization? So I thought I first might want to define data quality monitoring. So Fern Harper from TDWI, a very well-respected analyst group, defined it as data quality refers to the overall suitability of data sets to serve its intended purpose. She goes on to say it involves the procedures, policies, and processes that an enterprise uses to maintain trustworthy data. And I think the key there is trustworthy data. But it also is a little bit broader definition than a lot of people think about data quality and data quality checks at the point of ingestion. Really, we think, and I think this definition illustrates that it is much broader than that. The data quality monitoring should happen throughout the data pipeline all the way through to consumption. Now, if you like, go out to TDWI and you can take their data quality maturity assessment and determine how your company falls within the maturity of the data quality rankings. Of course, being an AI type of a webinar as well, I couldn't help myself but to ask ChatGPT, what is data quality monitoring? And really, it came back with a similar type of response. Data quality monitoring is a process that involves tracking, measuring, and ensuring the quality of the data within an organization's systems and databases. So again, it went on to really talk about particular types of tests or things that you should be doing in data quality monitoring. So, you know, it started with data profiling, the ability to understand more about your data, but adding some generative AI into that, you can get more understanding and some more value out of that. Certainly being able to understand the data quality metrics and make sure that your data analytics reports and dashboards are right. Using machine learning or algorithms for data observability is a key part of data quality monitoring, and then data validation. As data is moving through all the different processes within your organization, from ingestion through ETL to data movement to warehouses, and then consumption in your data analytics platform, data validation plays a pivotal role there. So that was sort of the definition of data quality monitoring. I think about artificial intelligence or AI as a very broad term. Again, it's been around since the 50s. It went through a little bit of a lull in the 60s and 70s. It became popular again, 80s and 90s. And now with open AI and everything, it's the buzzword of the industry right now. But I look at AI and that overarching term is encompassing neural networking. It encompasses natural language processes, predictive analytics, and generative AI. That's hard to say when you have a cold. And so Gen AI and really the machine learning algorithm types of things of AI is what we'll be talking about today. But AI is a computer system that performs tasks that usually require human intervention and giving you ability to interact and provide that capability without humans having to be involved. So what can OpenAI do or ChatGPT do? I thought, okay, let's just get some simple examples. Here's one where I just asked ChatGPT to create a SQL statement to validate an email address. And it came up and generated this SQL statement to validate the email address. It could get more sophisticated if I'd ask it more things, but it's simply just generating something very easily. So I log into OpenAI, I ask this question, and it generates this. If I wanted to, I could copy this, use it elsewhere, or I also ask it, another simple transformation is, can you concatenate two fields, city and state? And so it not only did that concatenation, again, a simple statement, simple thing to do, wouldn't necessarily be that you'd be using ChatGPT or Gen AI to do this, but you could take this and use it in your code. But it also told me how I could update my tables based upon that concatenation. So I thought, okay, I wonder if ChatGPT is critical of its own SQL that it generated. So I took and I asked it, is there anything wrong with the SQL statement that they just generated? So now it's actually given me some advice, right? So this is quite remarkable to me in that, it tells me the data type should be varchar 255. It tells me null values, city and state. If any of them fields contain null values, you're liable to get null values in both fields, and goes on and gives advice about that particular SQL statement. Is there anything wrong with that SQL statement? I thought, well, I wonder if it can generate combinations of things and not just SQL, but Python code. So a lot of times in data analytics, you want to be able to make sure that you have all your filters covered in your data analytics delivery. So here I ask it to give me all the combinations of states, Florida, states in the Southeast, basically, and then revenue numbers of 1,500 or 5,000 and then 10,000. And then for particular sectors, finance, manufacturing, and so on. So it came back and it gave me the Python code that I could execute to create that file. And that file looks something along these lines. So, that could be useful. But again, the real value, I think, of Gen AI and AI in general is when you can embed that intelligence into your application. So, and when people do that, they typically call that a co-pilot. So if when we embed Gen AI or AI into our DataOps suite, those things are called co-pilots because what they're doing is they're guiding and directing and helping you. They're not flying the plane, but they are the co-pilots. They're assisting you in what you're trying to do. So an example of a co-pilot would be, okay, let's say that we can do data profiling. We can already do that. But what if I could invoke Gen AI to get more insights out of that profile, to do comparisons of the profile to previous comparisons, and give me any results or any anomalies that are being identified? Or what if I could, within the DataOps Suite, within my testing capability, generate data quality rules based upon giving Gen AI the names of the column, the table, and the data types, and some context. And it generates all my data quality rules automatically for me. So if you have, a few tables, that's somewhat helpful. But if you have hundreds or thousands of tables, that is a game changer. That gives you a tremendous advantage, or it saves you a tremendous amount of time. We also use AI in terms of observability. So learning about the data and that's being ingested and predicting or finding anomalies in that data is something that we do, and we already have incorporated into the DataOps Suite. Another component, another area where it takes time is how do you independently validate your ETL processes? So, you create an ETL process. You have data maps that you usually use in order to guide, the business rules and guide the developer or the ETL developer to create the transformations and enrichments. But to independently verify that that's correct, you have to replicate what you did in your ETL process. Now that takes some time, but what if you could create the transformations from the ETL mapping documents, and along with that, the test data needed to test that ETL process? That would be a game changer, and that would save you a tremendous amount of time. Another area that we would consider a Datagaps Copilot area would be in BI validation. What you need to do a lot of times is I need to validate my dashboards and reports back to some source data. So, with Datagaps or DataOps Suite, we can grab the underlying data that is used to render a dashboard and say there are metrics in that dashboard that we want to validate back to a SQL server database. Well, you have to create SQL, but with Gen AI, it can actually create that SQL for you. And as part of this overall process and this framework, it can make all these things more automatic and easier to do and deploy. An example of a copilot that we're introducing is, data quality rules. At the point of ingestion, we give our copilot the names of the table. We give it the column names as well as the data types and maybe some context. Later on, maybe if you want to, you could provide data, but there's that whole data security issue there. But what it does automatically is, in this particular case, it generated many rules, but here are 4 of the rules on the column name quantity sold and amount sold. It gave me a negative quantity sold check. It gave me a quantity sold outlier check and a number of other checks. So it created the SQL for me to automatically validate the data that's coming in is properly formed. So that's one of the areas that we see a huge advantage in capability of introducing a Gen AI copilot within the DataOps Suite technology. We've already done a lot of the machine learning or algorithms to do observability. So that's another area where is when you create data quality rules without Gen AI, you have to do a little bit of work. It's all parameterized or it's all configured, but you have to do a little bit of work. But if you point the observability algorithms to the data, it will automatically learn about that data. It will determine that, hey, this data is within the bounds of norm, but if it falls outside the bounds of norm, then it will alert you to the fact that, hey, there's an issue, a potential anomaly in the data that you're ingesting, or the data that you just did transformations on, or the data that you just consumed for your data analytics, and so on. So observability is also used in multiple places within validation of the data pipeline. We also did a project with one of our customers where they had Calibra and they wanted to integrate Calibra with Datagaps, and they wanted the data quality rules within Calibra to be used to generate data quality rules that can execute within Datagaps. So we provided that interface and that capability to grab those rules, and we created the data quality rules and scores within Datagaps. But there was a little bit of an extra step in there. Now, if we would introduce Gen AI into this process, it would be much more seamless. So now we would read the rules, Gen AI would create the rules, we'd execute the rules and give the information. We'd track the bad data. We would be able to give the scores back to Calibra and so on. So those are the types of things that are happening within Datagaps, some very far along, and some futuristic, but we're really embracing the Gen AI and AI in general to embed that capability into data ops and Datagaps technologies so it can make the decisions that would normally require a human to make. And we're very excited about the direction of the roadmap where we're headed. So a little bit about Datagaps, what we do, we're all about that end-to-end testing. So we focus on observing and validating the data pipeline from the point of ingestion through to consumption in the data analytics platform. We believe that Gen AI and AI in general can really augment and give you a lot of flexibility and capability in doing your data pipeline testing. So we're embedding things into the ETL validator, as I said, so it can generate your ETL, your transformation rules based upon the mapping documents. Into BI Validator, we're doing things to make sure that in BI Validator you could do observability, or you could create that SQL. In data quality monitoring, giving you the ability to not only just create those data quality rules, but also do some comparisons and such. And then I mentioned creation of test data based upon the table and the column names and the data types, creating test data automatically that would test your ETL process or test your data analytics report and a variety of things along those lines. So winding down, one of the success stories we love to talk about is a major university out of the Northeast where they needed to use us for data warehouse migration to Snowflake. And so they used us to do that and used us to also do their ETL validation. And they use us for Tableau to OBI regression testing. And they also do data quality monitoring of their student information system. They had thousands of tables and reports and data quality rules to test. Now, this is prior to us actually enabling and putting Gen AI into the DataOps Suite. So they had a team of 15 people doing migration testing, data quality monitoring, and a variety of things. By using us, they actually achieved 100% data validation of all the reports that they were producing, but also 100% of the data. And not only did they do much more validation and testing, it drove down the cost by 60%. We had a call with them yesterday, and what they have indicated is the direction that we're heading and what we're looking at and what we're doing with Gen AI is going to help improve or further improve their cost savings by as much as 50%. So, we saved them 60% on the initial implementation, but they see the real value of adding Gen AI or AI into and embed that capability right within our testing software. So with that, I would like to stop now and turn this over to Shibanshu for the demonstration.
All right, thank you for that. So now let's get started. Before I get to the actual technical nitty-gritties of our application, and we do plan to show a live demo of the product itself in this use case, just a few lingering comments or questions that might arise while we're talking about AI and our product as a whole. The first one is with regards to the location of this model and the data sets as a whole. If this is the first time you've heard of Datagaps, well, I would like to clarify that our application can be installed directly onto your infrastructure, be it on-prem, on cloud, Azure, AWS, or Google-based systems as well. The main reason for this is quite straightforward. We want to ensure that the data and the BI reports and other KPIs, which are sensitive inherently, don't really leave your secure space. So the application is always installed behind your firewalls to ensure that there is no data leakage. In the same way, the models that we are going to illustrate, the AI models and the other aspects, here we are going to be using some standalone models which are installed directly onto the infrastructure itself. So they come packaged with the product. And that's one way where we circumvent the issue of data or any kind of context being sent out to other companies, like such as OpenAI. So all the examples that I'm going to illustrate, they all work with an internal model, which is bounded by the product itself. Just a caveat is correction on that front. While we do have our application being installed directly onto our client's infrastructure, we do offer a bit of SaaS if that is a use case that you require. So with that, let's get started. The screen that I've kept open for so long as I was going through the actual model location and the application location are the sources that our application supports inherently. To just mimic what Dave said a few minutes ago, it's the fact that data quality monitor is not something that occurs just at ingestion, but also throughout your multiple layers. This could be your bronze, silver, and golden layer if you're going with the medallion architecture. It could be on other systems as well. So these are the sources we support inherently, and we have a good amount of sources that we support out of the box using, say, API connectors, generic connectors, and CDA type connector drivers as well. Now let's jump into the actual technical demo, and let's put ourselves into the shoes of a QA personnel who's been tasked to ensure that, well, there are going to be 50 tables coming in. We need to apply quality rules on all of them. Let's see how fast we can do it. For this, I'm going to get into a demo showcase, and I'm going to import my tables. You see the table I'm importing right now is from SQL Server, but as we showcased earlier, you can pick them up from any specific location needed. Currently, I want to stick to dimensional tables, so let me mass import dimensional tables into the mix. And let's take this one out as it seems like an extra table. And that's it. The tables and correspondingly the relations between the tables, everything is imported directly within my system using the relations and JDBC connections. But yeah, that's good. But I have so many tables, and in a realistic scenario, I will have, say hundreds of tables throughout. So creating rules for them one by one through a system might not be the case. So yeah, let's do that in mass. So I go into the wizard. This is the data rules wizard that we have here. And while we have all the rule operations for something along the lines of, say, null checks, duplication checks, making sure there are no orphan records, we can also apply business validation rules and, in fact, niche operators as well. So you can create all of this, and all of this comes with the application from the get-go. Our focus, however, today is, of course, the Gen AI. So if I click on this particular front, it asks me for a prompt. And this is where things get really interesting. Because as of now, since we are working with the developer version of the application, you see this particular prompt. What we plan to do is add an upload button as well. This upload button will be linked to a document, in which all of us know is a mapping document. Basically, if there is a document that your team keeps in any specific format, which holds the specific rules and associations that you want the application to know before it creates quality rules, you can use this. Currently, we are starting with text, but as you can imagine, it's a very easy transfer for us to have an upload button here as well for text-specific systems. So that's what we will do. In this case, since we cannot have a complete mapping document, I'll just ask it that I want more business rules. That's what I specify. And then in next, I basically define what are different columns and data types I want to work with. So of course, I can individually check a few columns, but let's do this in bulk. I want to ensure that all the rules in DIM customer, and let's pick up a few columns from DIM employee are also getting this treatment. And next, I create generate data rules. That's it. It's just as simple as that. I could have easily chosen the entire set of rules and asked the generative AI to use the document that I've provided to generate rules for me. But right now in the backend, we are sending in the context, not the data right now. We are sending in only the context, and the application comes back with specific rules. And let's go take a quick look at them. The first two ones are pretty straightforward. These are non-negative rules, which is something that we might expect. The other ones are more business specific. We want to ensure that our email address is in the correct set of characters that they are included with them. We also want to ensure that the yearly income is once again valid. And we also want to ensure there are no empty strings and other aspects. Note that for this particular set of rules and demos, what we are doing is we are limiting the system to provide us 10 or 20 rules, maybe just 3 rules per column. But all of this can be overridden within our application. Just to start, we started about 3 or 4 minutes ago where I had 0 rules deployed and I had so many tables. But right now, with the click of a button, I'm done. All these rules have been defined. And now if I go back to my specific data model, let's close this. I'll go back to my data model. You'll see we have rules defined for DIM customer as well as for DIM employee. Once again, this is a work of progress right now where we're actually trying to define them, and we want to integrate this further and further within our application. But so far, just to reiterate what we have done, the LLM or the generative AI model sits within your firewalls within your system. The application also sits within your firewalls within your system. You get a prompt or a user file upload option to ensure that you can provide mapping documents or you can provide data quality documents that you set up. And as Dave was alluding to earlier, say you use Colibra as a data governance tool. We have API connectivity directly with Colibra as well, to the point that if you want to define a rule in Colibra, the application can pick that rule up, associate that with the context provided of the other data sets you work with, and then in that fashion, generate rules accordingly. So it's just as simple as that. And all of these rules, once again, we were not sticking to just basic rules like null checks. You can also be ensuring that you can do business rule checks. You can also ensure that the data sets you're working with are actually valid. If I had gone back and I would have prompted the application to say that, well, I'm working with healthcare data, or I'm working with domain-specific data, or something along those lines, the application would have understood that and would have forced the GenAI to create more rules which are more specific to that specific domain. However, I do understand, since I come from a background of data engineering myself, the main aspect that I would be very happy for, of course, is the upload feature. So if I can just upload a mapping file, well, that's it, and that will take care of a great amount of things. And so we are very proud to have this particular feature come up within our application. So that's the first aspect of data quality rules. I do see there are a few questions coming up, but don't worry, we have plenty of time towards the end to actually discuss these questions. And now I'd like to shift from this perspective to a different perspective where we discuss profiling and anomalies. So in our first application, we used GenAI to define the rules for us and did a bulk of work for us. So even if we had 50 or 100 tables, the majority time I've spent it just choosing which rules I want to go ahead with. And the application will check if these actual SQL rules do work out or do they send out an error. Everything is handled. We want to ensure that at the end of the day, we are saving manual labor and time of the end user. Because at the end of the day, it's the work of the QA tester is not to repeat the same test 3 or 4 times or 20 times within the system, is to define the test they want to run, select what type of test is okay for this specific use case, and then run with it, deploy it across the entire model architecture. So in that particular way, in the previous example, we have saved a lot of time and resources, which will naturally be spent, say weeks with designing the rules, creating the rules, and of course deploying them as well. Even though our application comes with automated features to deploy these rules in bulk, having the generation part automated as well is going to save a lot of resources and time for all the users who use our product currently, and of course any future users as well. Now let's jump to the other aspect of the coin. You see, when I go to data quality monitor, there are 2 pillars that come up within my system. See, data quality score is one of them, and the other one is analysis. Now we're going to focus on the analysis aspect. Because while you can apply rules at a record-to-record level, the real question comes by, well, is this data set that I received actually valid? So what do I mean by that? So let's take a real example that I used to deal with back in back when I was working as a DE. We used to get a file every week. It was a unzipped file, and it was a pipe delimited files that we used to get. And we used to know that something is off with the file by just looking at the memory file, the actual memory this particular file took. Because if the volume is off, well, that's a huge red flag. And anyone who has worked in pipelines do understand that there are certain patterns that associate themselves with volume, with the amount of nulls, with the distribution and everything else that you see with it. So that's where we introduce observability and profiling. So let's get into the actual use case itself. And I would like to once again create this on the fly just to illustrate the ease of it. Let's call this demo 4, as I might have demo or demo 2 present already. Let me pick up a JDBC connection. And this JDBC connection is going to be to SQL Server. Next, again, I'm going to jump directly into Copilot to fasten this process as much as possible. And here's the quick part. So you see, the application is going to send context. But once again, we are going to send the context that you would like to send. And here we say context specifically, not data. Because if you're not working with the internalized LLM model, and if you are in fact connecting to OpenAI directly, you really wouldn't want to send data out there. But sending things which encompasses the column names and the data type are fair game in this case. So here again, you get the entire choice of choosing what exactly you would like to send in this particular system to our internal LLM. But here I have an example set up already, and I'm going to be using the internet sales and currency rate as two fact tables, what I'll be sending forward. The exact problem statement here is, well, while I am going to apply a good amount of, say, machine learning code on top of it, I want this automated. I don't want to work on this from a great degree. So here's what I do. I have a prompt ready here. Let's just save time, which basically asks our LLM to, hey, I want to keep track of a lot of metrics and aggregates in this internet sales table. Can you please create that? And rightfully so, it creates them right away. And of course, I can apply this code and test it live within my system itself to see, well, if it's working correctly or not. So everything looks pretty good. But now let's jump ahead one step. These are multiple metrics. I want them all in a single metric. So well, it's just as simple as defining the question we have right there. And I ask it to just, coagulate all the metrics within a single table. And well, it's going to generate that. And here we go. We've generated everything. And in fact, you'll notice that we're also keeping track of the other table that we had earlier, which was currency key. So right now, if we can apply this and we can actually run the system, we'll see, well, now the application, the query is pretty accurate. If there are any errors, we can, of course, get back from that particular error as well. But in this case, we see we're basically connecting the system and then running the entire application as a whole. So in this way, we are basically defining our application and defining the query accordingly as well. So in this way, the application has actually generated a good amount of data sets that they have to work with here. So you see a great amount of queries right there. Although I do want to ask it to recheck the query, as it should not take this long. So we can, of course, do that as well. So let's just make sure that, well, the currency key and date should match. Again, this is where you come in as an end user. Sometimes you might not be need that. But here, the issue, that the reason it took so long to generate was that we had the order on currency key and date. And here, you can just use this particular test case itself. Everything is generated by AI. And now the application has actually generated an actual aggregate on a date level. And so what we are doing in the background is that we are running this test case now, as we see, and we're actually creating a data set out of it. So far, we were in developer mode, and now we'll wait for this application to generate this large data set, given that we're working with a fairly large data set. So that's the first aspect of what I've done. I've asked the application to help me with the generation of SQL code. And you'll notice this is very important, particularly in other examples which we want to illustrate, where, of course, we were talking about BI. So let's assume you're working with a Power BI system. Now, what our application does inherently is very apparent with this particular diagram, where we can connect to Power BI sources, pull reports out, and then compare them against the raw data sources like SQL Server, Excel files, and so on. But the aspect here is that a Power BI report is going to have aggregates. It's not going to have entire data sets. If it has, it's very easy for us as well. But the creation of this aggregate, which is usually pretty complex as you have multiple systems involved, can be automated to a great degree using Copilot within your SQL as well. And this is something that we have done in one of our webinars, where we did this live, basically, to show how easy this particular process is. Going back to our use case, we see that the application, since we are doing this live, we're actually connecting, switching on the cluster right now, connecting to the corresponding JDBC connections, and running this query live. So that's what's happening in the background. But after this comes the next aspect, which is, well, now that I've created this list, where is the observability and where is the profiling? So for that, while this runs in the background, let's quickly jump into a different use case, which is dedicated to this. And I'll be using a Tableau report now, just to illustrate my point further. The main reason to use Tableau, again, is since we're talking about profiling and observability, it's very easy for us to have this use case defined right there. You see, this is the Tableau report that I'm working with. And the reason I'm using BI tools is because, well, these are the representations of data. I can't just talk about data without showcasing something here. And so we have this set of use cases where these are files that are coming in. This could be your BI report in the end as well, and other aspects. The main gist here is that I need to ensure that if, going back to my original example, that if there is a volume shift within my system, or if there is a shift in the distribution to my system, or if there are more decimal points included, suddenly the length of the columns in my address lines are much larger than I'm expecting, and anything on that sort. And this could be one and anything. The application has a one-stop solution, which firstly keeps track of all of these things, and then correspondingly calls out any specific differences. So here, if I move to results, there is an anomaly found out. The anomaly is specific to sales. And within sales, all the other aggregates look good other than mean. And this graph tells the entire story in a nutshell, where as the application moves throughout multiple runs, we see that our mean is between 150 to 250K. But suddenly there's a huge jump that causes our mean to rise up at 720K. And this is obviously some sort of wrong news here. I mean, yes, this could be the result of a transformation, but more importantly, the application has understood the patterns it sees and has caught them on. This is further exacerbated in use cases where seasonality and other observability notions comes into picture. So that's what data observability comes as. So here, as you can see, I've already loaded my load. So let me do this in live itself. I drag and drop data observability. And here, you get a good amount of test cases and control over what you would like to do. So here, if you remember, we specifically asked a currency key to be present here because currency key is the categorization I want to run. All the other measures are present right there. I want to keep track of the sales, the average unit price, all the other quantities that the application work with, as well as the average exchange rate if I can. And I provide the date to the application as well. Everything is well. The final aspect is just choosing the prediction method. We recommend IQR for any specific use cases, but if there are something specific, you can do that as well. And now I'll run the application. And while we wait for the application for in the background to be trained on this particular data set to understand where anomalies come into picture and then speak them, I'll actually showcase the example of the result in a different use case. So here in this particular Tableau report, if you notice this particular irregular graph, this is well realistic data. Your orders, your metrics, and other aspects are not going to be a straight line. They will have some variations and they will have some sort of reach to it. Maybe you have some metrics which are always growing. Maybe you have some metrics which are always decreasing, but there's going to be variance within them. Here, since we are looking at orders, there's obviously seasonality into the mix as well. There's so many factors here. And while the end user of this particular report has graciously already categorized them, you notice that categorization is also something that we might have to do. So here, we do all of this. We do the same thing that we did for our live example, where we categorize them first based on our use cases, define the dates and other aspects. And here in the results, there are anomalies found within our application. And if I go to a specific anomaly, you'll see that the anomaly is for a specific category. It's not for delivery truck. It's just for regular air. And here, we notice something very nice, which is if you move your cursors from left to right, or from the particular screen from left to right, you'll see that the application is actually trying to understand the patterns, the rises and falls that it usually expects. And that's why we see a pulsating beat within this entire graph, because the application is understanding that this is a seasonal metric. And as it gets more and more data, it's more confident at the exact bounds of this particular data set. And so as we keep track of it through and through, the application is going to catch an unseasonal high. And so in this particular manner, we have actually caught an anomaly within the system, which can be derived by the end user, which can be derived by the AI aspect as well. Back to our example, here we see that, yes, the application has also failed. We have a lot more records present, and we can actually go in and see for a specific date if something has swing. And you will see a specific amount here as well. That again, since we're working with a much larger data set here, that's why you see this, a bit of a mess of a graph, because there's a lot of metrics present here. But if I just zoom into something specific, you'll notice that, yes, the application does keep a rolling window to keep track of these particular files and data sets as well. Finally, before we end for questions, just a quick caveats on this. We do have another use case which is specific to ETL-based AI validation. So it's very similar to what we showcased earlier, where if we provide the context of data to the end generative AI model, the Gen AI model is actually going to create the data quality rules. We have something similar for ETL validation as well. It's a work in progress, and we definitely would ask you to keep a lookout for that in your mailboxes. But it basically works in a similar fashion, where say you're working with DBT, the application connects to the DBT transformation that you're working with and keeps track of the changes that you're doing within your ETL transformation. And based on the corresponding changes, it create rules on the actual output of the data itself. So it can create rules based on the transformations itself as well as the rules. So basically, if you are converting your transformation, or if you're doing an update within your system, the application identifies the deltas within your transformation logic and then subsequently create rules specifically to validate those transformations if they are still valid. Are there some miscoded records moving ahead and anything along that front? But in the interest of time, we would like to take a pause right now. And we're very happy to be showcasing these specific use cases. And just to finish up one aspect, as you see, the application is pretty open to the end user. We are easily integrated with other systems as well. Collibra was just an example. We are integrated with Azure DevOps, with Jenkins, and a lot more tool sets. And more importantly, as you see, we truly embrace Gen AI, and we want to ensure that our application is as easy to use to the end user as possible. And we like to reduce even more manual labor that any QA tester goes through. So with that, I would like to thank you all for listening so far, and let's open the floor up for some questions. All right. Yeah, there are many questions here. Let me go through them one by one itself. So how does the AI handle updates requirements? Will it update only those rules that were previously generated on a rule? That's an excellent question. Yes, as I discussed with the ETL example as of now, that if you are changing your requirements specifically, those corresponding rules should be changing as well. This is not something that we have planned for right now, but it's definitely in our roadmap, especially when it comes to updating existing rules. If you want to create new rules based on the updated requirement, we can do that right now as well. But if you want to update existing rules, that's a feature we are definitely working on, and it's within our roadmap. How many false positives and negative tests have you noticed from AI? Yeah, this is also an excellent question. And I feel that, yes, whoever has asked this question has definitely worked with AI systems, as false positives and false negatives is something that a lot of Copilot, even GitHub Copilots or other ASP users do complain about, that this particular code or this particular function might look correct, but this actually does the opposite of what I would want to do specifically. And within our use cases, we have been stress testing it for a while. And yes, it depends entirely on the exact prompts as well. If you give a weird prompt to the end system, it does not generate the set of rules that you want. But from our experience, especially if you're working from simple to mid complexity type of quality rules, the application does shine. The Gen AI is pretty accurate, and we are reaching about 90-95% accuracy for any SQL generated here. So it's pretty accurate from that perspective. But if you're going to do something a bit more complex, which is much more on the line of, say, if you want to make sure that a measure that comes from 7-8 tables together with multiple transformations in the mix is actually valid, the generative AI is going to say an answer, but there's a good chance that the answer is incorrect because of the sheer complexity of the problem statement and the lack of context it might have. So yes, there are going to be positives and negatives, but there are going to be more positives in really complex use cases. Most use cases, most DQ rules, we won't see a great number of that. So next question is this feature available to existing customers? No, as you see, this particular feature right now, we are working on a dev environment, and we do plan to release this as soon as possible. I can't comment on a date yet, but as you see, it's already within our beta environment, and we would like to push it to our next gen as well. But yeah, it's almost done. As you can see, I did everything live. So it should be out within the next couple of releases, hopefully the next one itself. Did you tell it for an example that customer key is greater than 0 manually, or is inferring based on the variable name? That since it's a customer key, it should not be less than 0. Yes, in this particular use case, I have not sent any data. Now, if I choose to send some data, and speaking of data here, the application can technically, send data which is inherently masked. I'll quickly showcase that, as that's a feature that we particularly use quite often here. So here you will notice that there are a lot of data sets which are null or masked right out. So this is the kind of data we would like to send out to the end user, so to the Gen AI, so that they understand that, okay, these are the different feature lists. This is the pattern of the keys it notices and so on. And then it can generate even more accurate systems. But again, sending data inherently could be problematic. But as of now, since we are trying to circumvent that by having the model in your system itself, it could be done. But to answer your question, no, I did not ask it to generate that manually. It inferred that because of the general knowledge that most keys in any system are hardly negative. So it should be positive from that perspective. Next, how secure is the AI for the business using it? Well, just to reiterate my answer there. Yes, the application is pretty secure, because at the end of the day, since our application and the LLM or the generative AI model will be behind your firewalls itself with nothing ever going out of it, not even logs, we are pretty confident that it'll be secure from that perspective. So no data or any kind of questions or metrics would be leaked.
Okay, so last question is, if my company has data privacy concerns with using AI, can that feature be shut off in the tool?
Everything related to AI will be completely optional to the end user. That's something that we do understand a lot of. Again, there's a lot of ethical aspects associated with it. So any feature that you see here will not be forced upon the end user. I mean, that's our general modus operandi for any feature as well. So we won't force any features on that. It'll be completely optional.
Okay, now another one is how secure the data will be while using this feature, I believe.
So once again, the security of the data implies that the data is leaving. You're using AWS and it's in a specific region behind a specific firewall. The application is such that, since it is installed within your AWS system itself, in this example, it will never ever leave your corresponding system. So because the data never leaves your system or leaves your secure space, it should be secure from that particular point of view. Note, we don't even get logs back once our client actually installs the product. And since we have a good number of clients who work in the pharmaceutical space, the healthcare space, even the FedRAM agencies or federal states, we have privacy and ensuring that the data is secure is pretty important to us. So yes, the data will be secure through and through. Will AI be an added cost? If so, how much? That's an excellent question. Well, since it's not going to be API based, it's going to be model based. We are still figuring out the exact parameters and metrics about it. And I believe Dave can answer this question towards the end later as well. And the final question, I guess, is a few more. Oh yeah. So will we generate PySpark? Will we generate PySpark code as in SQL? Yes. The application does have Python and Spark supported, and that also comes with the same Copilot support that I showcased for SQL, where you can choose to send it a bit of context and it will generate PySpark code associated with what you need. So yes, you can generate PySpark code as well as Python code, as well as say typical Scala code if you want to do that as well. And we do have DB scripts in the mix as well. So we do cover the entire spectrum of processing nodes that you might need. All right, Dave, I think you can take the question with regards to the cost. I believe that will be a significant one.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite prepared to answer that question, but we certainly will let people know as soon as we've figured things out. And I think since we're towards the end, if there are no other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate you attending the event. Hopefully you got some things out of it. I think it's pretty exciting time at Datagaps to see how things are evolving very, very rapidly. And, we love to collaborate with our clients. So clients and prospects, if you have ideas and want to know whether we're thinking about it, we love to hear about it. And many times, we take that direction and it changes what we're doing. So we appreciate your effort or your time today. And if there's anything else we can do, just reach out to us. If you'd like to have a more personalized demonstration of the overall technology, feel free to reach out and we can customize a demo to you and your organization.